Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to answer one of the questions that many of you have been asking me, and that is whether transition has a finished line. Now, I know that I did a video a while back where I talked about whether gender dysphoria will ever go away. And this video, in a sense, somewhat similar, but it offers a little bit different perspective, and it tends to break it down on different domains to help you better understand what kind of a finishing line to expect and to give you a better insight into a roadmap for your own personal transition. So when we're talking about a finishing line, what we're essentially talking about is we're talking about achieving whatever goals or desirable outcome that you're seeking out to achieve. So for some of you, that desirable outcome will be to fully transition, whatever fully transition may mean to you. Remember, all of you are very different. For some of you, it may be to get all of the surgeries you want. For some of you, it could be to feel the most congruency with your body. For others of you, it's going to be to feel the most congruency with your gender expression. So whatever your goal is right now in terms of what you'd like to achieve in relationship to gender, your finish line would be when you're able to actually achieve that goal. And another thing, when people say finish line, what they mean is there ever an end point to a transition? Meaning, is there a point where transition just stops and you don't really have to address any kind of transition related aspects of it? It's a little bit more complex to answer this question because it's not a clear-cut yes or no answer. The reason why it's not a clear-cut, because transition is, in my opinion, multifaceted. And today I want to discuss three very important levels of transition that I feel that essentially, ideally, would be great for people to achieve as much as possible in order to alleviate as much dysphoria as possible. The first level of the domain is physical. So physical would be achieving actually physicality, physical presentation of the bodies that you want. Usually in the physical domain, that's where we see hormonal interventions, that's where we see surgical interventions. Physicality is really important for a lot of you. Physicality has a lot to do with possibility for a lot of you. So when somebody says, is it possible to achieve finish line, end line, finish line in a transition? For some of you, yes. Some of you are fully able to achieve and close the door in this domain, meaning you are able to get the surgeries you want, and you are able to get to the point where you feel your body physically is as congruent as you wish it to be. And as a result, that would be you achieving your finish line on that. Now, for some people, what usually happens with achieving that finish line is when we set up very unrealistic expectations about our physicality, we tend to become very kind of stuck on it. In other words, if you set the bar for your physicality, for your physical goal very high, and the high bar would look something like you want to have a perfect body, you want to have perfect curves. If you identify as transmasculine, you want to have a perfect definition. You want to have the ideal height that you desire. We all set bars on ourselves. The goal, in order to get to the finish line and see something as actually a finish line, is how realistic are those goals to begin with. And for those people who have very realistic goal, a lot of you who are watching who have physically transitioned probably have achieved it and probably feel that you're done. Physically, you feel very congruent. You don't feel like you need any other surgeries. You may feel that, yeah, my body is not perfect, but guess what? Nobody else's body is perfect. We all have some level of acceptance to do within our physicality. So the first domain is physicality when it comes to transition and when it comes to finishing line and the end line, if you will. The second domain is social. Social means whether you socially feel that you are embedded in a world we live in. Socially also means whether you feel that you are integrated into our culture and society today with the presentation and expression of the gender that you identify with. socially can be sometimes much more difficult to achieve for some people in terms of an end line than physical, because social is something that a lot of times can be outside of your hands, can be outside of your willpower, if you will. Social a lot of times can depend on the culture you're in. It can also depend on people you're around. If you're in an environment where people are very transphobic and where people are very against trans identified individuals, it can be very difficult to be integrated socially, especially if you are very comfortable with your trans identities. I hope you are, and you are comfortable talking about your trans identity. And sometimes that can be very difficult, whereas physical is something that is a little bit more dependent on you finding resources and you finding capacities in order to go there and get the physical modifications you want. Social is a little bit more, I would say, outside of your well, it's like I said before, it's very dependent on other people. But achieving social transition end goal in mind, or end line or finish line, finishing, in other words, socially transitioning, would mean that you are very, very comfortable. Well, very, very comfortable is overstatement, because who is very, very comfortable? I don't think any of us are. But you are, in other words, are comfortable with yourself, whatever gender you identify, and you're comfortable navigating the social milieu of your lifestyle. You're comfortable being around other people. You're comfortable disclosing or not disclosing your gender identity. You're comfortable within your own skin, you're comfortable within your own social domain. So that would be the social part of transition. And for a lot of people, whereas physical is something easier to achieve, and a lot of people kind of close the door in that domain and say, I'm done with this. Social, a lot of times, like I said in the other video, tends to continue throughout your life, because social integration can be difficult. Especially it can be difficult for those of you who are older. The older you are when you transitioned, the much more harder it is going to be for you to shed some of the gender constraints that were imposed on you, and to shed some of the layers of genders that you were presenting prior to transitioning. So for that reason, social can be difficult, and as a result, it can cause some level of discomfort or some level of dysphoria throughout your life. So for that reason, people say transition is never fully completed, because socially it is always kind of evolving. So that's a second domain. Third domain, when it comes to completing transition, will be an emotional psychological domain. And in my opinion, that is the most important domain. Not to disregard that physical and social is also important, but if I were to rank all three of them, I would say that emotional psychological would be first, physical would be second, and social would be third. The reason why I say that emotional psychological domain is the most important one in order to achieve is because it has to do with your inner confidence, your inner acceptance, your inner self-awareness. In other words, it has to do with your inner capacity to hold on to yourself. And that's something that can go miles and miles away. Especially confidence and acceptance of your gender identity can go miles away when social domain doesn't really work out in your favor, or there's challenges within social domain. Even when there's challenges in the physical domain, if you have inner sense of confidence, inner sense of belongingness and knowing who you are, without yet achieving physical congruency, that can help. It will not take away gender dysphoria. It will not alleviate gender dysphoria, but it will help you make better plans. It will help you to make whatever things you need to make in preparation to physical transition. So the emotional and psychological is the one where your inner self has a very strong grip on yourself in terms of your identity. And I have seen people who had completed physical transition. They feel very good about their bodies and very congruent, who even socially are doing incredibly well. But because the emotional psychological has not been integrated, they struggle. They struggle because they're constantly hypervigilant and paranoid that there are either people going to see that they're trans, or that they are in other words, the insecurities come up in areas of relationships. They're afraid they will never find a partner. They're afraid they will always be alone. They're afraid they're never going to be good enough. They're afraid they're now not going to be good enough as women, or good enough as men, or good enough as non-binary, or whatever gender identities they identify with. So all of this performance anxiety in terms of navigating your world tends to come up. So the emotional psychological domain is incredibly important. And I know that a lot of you ask me, well, how can one accept oneself? And that's a challenge. It's not easy to put into words, and it's not something easy to break down. It's not something easy to just say that, acceptance is something that you just have to accept on an inner level. Acceptance takes time. And a lot of times what helps accept ourselves are people around us. If people around us are supportive, if people around us love us for really who we are and there for us, it helps us build up acceptance, because we can see that we're not just existing in of itself. We can see that other people see us as something valuable. When we see that others see us of value, we start cultivating that value within ourselves. So those are three most important domains in my opinion. There's, of course, a lot of other domains when it comes to transition. There is transpersonal domain, for example. There's an interpersonal domain. There is a vocational domain to transition in terms of career aspirations. I mean, there's all these micro domains. But these three, I think, are the most important ones. And again, that's physical, social, and psychological / emotional. And is it possible to achieve and finish line in all three domains? Yes, I have seen people who have achieved what we call finish line. Finish line meaning not that they don't have any dysphoria, it's just that they're not thinking in their head that they're transitioning, nor they're thinking that they need to go through any transitioning steps. They feel comfortable with who they are. They feel very confident with who they are. They feel good about themselves, and they don't feel like they need to owe anybody an explanation. They don't feel like they need to apologize to anybody for who they are. They don't feel like they need permission. In other words, they feel in so many ways that cis people do, like myself, who take our gender for granted, who don't even think about gender twice. Is it possible to achieve that? Yes, it's possible. But like everything else, sometimes it can be challenging when things are outside of your control. So those are the most important domains. And like I said, it is possible to achieve all of them or achieve some of them and continue to try to navigate yourself and achieve the other ones if you haven't achieved them yet. But is there like one big finish line in terms of transition? No, not in my book, because there's so many different micro finishing line when it comes to transition, and you have to decide for yourself which one is most important to you. So comment below, let me know where you at in your transition right now. Do you feel like you achieved one of these domains? And how did you know, especially when you achieved it? What was the telling sign for you that you achieved it? And which domain are you working on right now? Or maybe you have achieved all three of these important domains. Comment below and let me know how you feel, how that makes you feel, and how that tends to modify and change your own relationship to yourself. Comment below, let me know, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.